So one of the things when we're answering questions, we just wanted to let everybody know kind of who's our experts in the room that are going to be helping with some of the questions. And you see our panel here. Some of us are here, some of us aren't able to join us today, but if you see a response from one of these guys, you'll know that they are part of our expert panel. We have, I'll talk about Jeff and myself here in a minute, but Rose Baker, she is the principal investigator. She knows a lot about PAYS. And she's with Penn State. She's part of our team as well. We also have Mary Johnston and Kelsey Kraft. They're also part of our team and part of our family, as we like to call it, our PAYS family. And they're with Bach Harrison. So they're also in the room to help out. And Sophia, we couldn't do this without her. She is our production. She makes sure everything's run smoothly. So today, Jeff and I will actually be the presenters, and Jeff is with PCCD, and I'll let him do a quick intro when he gets started sharing a few things. And I'm Phyllis Law, and I'm with EPIS, and I am will act as facilitator as well as do a little bit of the presentation this afternoon. So do we have so looking at our poll right now, most everybody is fairly familiar with PAYS itself. We have a few that are fairly familiar, and then somewhat. So we're kind of in that space. Everybody's kind of good to go, and still wanting to learn a little more about PAYS. So Jeff and I are excited about that. And what he and I are going to cover today, it's listed here on your screen, and we're going to talk a little bit about history. We're going to go through a little bit survey analysis and methodologies, talk a little bit about basic information from the report, types of reports, and then also how to put your data to work. We definitely want to ground this conversation today, and this is going to be a very quick overview. That we are not training you on each one of these sections, because no way could we do that in 45 minutes. So we definitely, the idea here is this is going to be a PowerPoint that you can take, use on your own, and really learn from it as you're using it. We think the information is fairly straightforward, so it's more of kind of an overview of the PowerPoint itself. So once we get started here and get going, any other polls we have ready, Sophia? I don't think so quite yet. Nope. So we're good to go with all those. So Jeff, I'm going to ask my colleague here to introduce himself and get us kicked off with our first bit of information.
All right, Phyllis, thank you so much for the overview. Sophia and Kelsey, thank you for joining us as well. I'm Jeff Coltrane. I am a Deputy Director at the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. I oversee our gun violence, our Office of Gun Violence Prevention, as well as our overall prevention initiatives, making sure that we coordinate across offices. And one of my favorite roles is the project leader for the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, which is what we'll be talking about today. You want to?
There we go.
There we go. So we are up to the 17th voluntary survey. PAYS has been coordinated in the Commonwealth since 1989. We do it every other year in the fall of the odd years. That allows us to track the same cohorts of kids throughout their academic career. So the kids take it in 6th grade, we'll take it in 8th grade, we'll take it in 10th, we'll take it in 12th. So you can see kind of the history of our participation. Up until 2013, PAYS was completely voluntary, paid for by school districts, private entities, coalitions, SCAs. Beginning in 2013, the Commonwealth came together. Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, Department of Education, and my agency, PCCD, all decided that PAYS provided data that was of great interest to planning for prevention. And we began to fund it at no cost for all agents, for all school districts and other schools that wish to participate. So you can see that the level of increase from when we began in 1989 up until 2019, we did change in 2001. It used to be just a surveillance survey. How many times in the last 30 days have you used alcohol? How many times in your lifetime have you used tobacco? Beginning in 2001, we built in the communities of care survey questions, the reasons why kids engage in problem behaviors, not just whether or not they did. So that has been an enormous value add to the Commonwealth and to our prevention folks over time. So here you can see kind of the historic trend. We're up to 415 of our 500 districts registered this year. We are ecstatic about that. We were really worried that we were going to see a drop off with everything going on with COVID-19. But we're not. We are right on track for where we are in the past. And I think what this has come to show us is how valuable that our schools and their coalition partners see the PAYS data. So you can see that we have 57 of our possible 58 counties participating. We were joking before, come on, Wyoming. Anyone out there that knows Wyoming, help us out. Let's get that as well. But for those 57 counties that have at least 2 school districts participating, there will be a county report posted on the website. So that's why that is important. You can see here our participation rate from 2019. Obviously, we're still in the midst of the 2021, but we had 74% of our possible students take part in PAYS. So of those districts that registered, 74% of all their kids filled out the PAYS survey and provided data to help plan for prevention efforts. And overall, 54% of all kids in the Commonwealth in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grades took part. So we have an enormous, valuable data source that is used by the state, by counties, and by local communities and schools to plan for how do we best help our kids and our families. So as an overview, PAYS came out of the Generation at Risk survey. I mentioned this previously. We added in the communities of care process. The CTC process, as is known, was developed by Dr. Hawkins and Catalano at the University of Washington. PAYS provides information about youth behaviors, knowledge, and attitude, what they know, what they think, and what they believe about antisocial behaviors. And this is extremely important because that allows us to really identify where there are misconceptions, where we can help to educate our kids, but also where they are engaging behaviors that need programming to help prepare them to grow into adulthood. PAYS provides a holistic approach across all the aspects of a student's life. It asks questions about what's going on in their community, what's going on in their school, what's going on in their family, what's going on with themselves and their friends. So this gets at the underlying roots of all the issues and all the influences that are faced by our kids. So I mentioned that we provide the survey at no cost. Every district that participates and every school that participates has a minimum of 25 students participate per grade, gets a free summary report that gives data at the local level. This is very important because we're not taking a look at what the themes are at the county level, at the state level, or the national level, but what's going on in your community itself. PAYS is anonymous and confidential. The kids are informed when they take the survey that none of their individual responses will be held against them, will be reported out, will be shared with their parents, their teachers, their administrators, their friends, anyone else. So we have a lot of confidence in the reliability of this data because of that anonymity. It takes about 45 minutes to administer. We offer it both in paper and pencil and online. This year, we're up to about 80% of our school districts are taking part in PAYS online. We think this came out of the pandemic, so one of the few things that have been a positive is the increase in ability to do data sharing and information sharing via electronic means. So we are ecstatic about having that. We'll talk a little more about some of the advantages of that. We do offer a Spanish version as well, so schools have the opportunity to take part via English or Spanish. So again, we're up to 85%. Thank you, Phyllis. I said last I checked, we're about 80%, but we're seeing 85% of our districts taking part online. We use what's known as a three-form design for the survey. This allows us to get the greatest number of responses to all the questions of the survey so that we have confidence in all those answers. Obviously, if you have a survey, the questions at the end may not have the same number of responses at the beginning, but using a three-form design, we ameliorate that. We are able to address that concern by rotating the questions faced by kids so we get the same number of answers. So one of the things in survey design and methodology is the idea of confidence intervals. How much do we have confidence that what the numbers that are responded to by our kids are accurate? So what you see here are the level of confidence plus or minus values for each of the grades and then overall. So if for example, our students say that 80% of them 80% of our 12th graders consumed alcohol within their lifetime. We have a plus or minus confidence of 1.7. So it's between 81.7 and I'm going to do my math real quick, 80 or 78.3. I hope I got that right. With that response rate. This is extremely accurate and extremely valuable and gives you a lot of confidence when you're using this information to plan for prevention. Thank you. So we often get questions. How do we know if our kids are being honest about that? Number one, the fact that it is anonymous and confidential gives us a lot of confidence in the data itself. The best research in survey design says that when a respondent knows that their answers are not going to be held against them, that no one's going to know how they responded, they're more likely to tell the truth. But we also built in some validity checks, is what we call them. So you can see the 5 validity checks that we use. There's a fictitious drug in the survey. If anyone answered that they did use that fictitious drug in the last month or over their lifetime, their survey response is thrown out. Improbable levels of high drug use. I always like to say if I report I did cocaine 30 times in the last 30 days and methamphetamines 30 times in the last 30 days and heroin 30 times in the last 30 days, I'm lucky to be alive, let alone in school to take the survey. So we throw that out. Past month use higher than lifetime. So if a kid says I used marijuana 30 times in the last 30 days, but only once in my entire life, if they do that for 2 different substances, we take that survey out. Age grade inconsistencies, if they say they were 21 years old in 6th grade, we don't think that's an accurate response, so that comes out. And then age of joining a gang that was higher than the reported age, as well as a validity check that we use. So this gives us a very high confidence in that. Less than 10% invalid surveys is considered a good response for a survey. As you can see, in 2019, 2.3% of surveys were thrown out. So we are extremely confident in this data and encourage the use of this data for planning at all levels, state, county, and local. So we have the national comparisons as well. It's good to know that you may be worried about what's going on with your local data, but to put it into perspective, we provide both state comparisons and national comparisons. So we have monitoring the future data for substance use. I'm going to not be able to say that word, sorry. That School Up North conducts the analysis every year for 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, but they provide the comparison that we use for the national basis for all substance uses. We also, in our partnership with Bach Harrison, use the Bach-Harrison norm. They have almost 900,000 students as part of their database. And you can see the states that participate as part of the Bach-Harrison universe that make up that universe of students. So we are able to provide risk and protection and other antisocial medicine comparisons, in addition to the drug and alcohol comparisons provided by MTF. We use what's known as cut points to determine the measure for risk and protective factors that help us to determine what percentage of our kids are higher or lower than the standard level of risk and protection. This allows us to determine who is at higher risk and who is at lower risk at a variety of risk and protective factors. Phyllis will get into much more detail about risk and protective factors, which is the backbone of PAYS and our prevention strategy. But we are able to use this information to really help us direct the efforts, to help us determine where the risk is so that we can address that risk to prevent the problem behaviors in the first place.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to take over now and talk a little bit about what you can actually find in your report. Again, since most of you are fairly familiar with what's going on or with PAYS itself, you'll have an idea of what's in here. But we do think that this slide is important and this information, because one of the really great things that we know is that we can really adapt PAYS and the survey itself to meet the needs of the day, if you will, right? And to ask questions in a way around topics that are meaningful for that time. You can see here over the course of time, we have added these different topics throughout the years that are, again, driven by what's happening in the world. You can see down on the right-hand side for 2019, the one area that we did add some questions around was around sleep and frequency of tiredness, like how often are you tired? Again, we are learning a lot about how important sleep is. And if someone my age, it's really important, but we're getting a lot of data around adolescents and how important that sleep is to their overall behavior as well as success in their life in general. This year, many of you are probably aware that we have added, for those districts who participate online, we have added COVID and remote learning questions, which will come out in a special report that we will roll out next month. We have also, in the 2021 version, when you're in the demographics section, we have provided an option, a gender option of other for those students who are identifying not male or not female. So we have an option there. We are looking to expand that gender identity space in 2023. Gives us some time to kind of look at the best of the best and see how we can address that here in PAYS come next administration. So as far as demographics goes, many times this is an area that a lot of folks just kind of overlook because it doesn't, there's so many other big information, lots of information to get out of the report, but it is important to take a look at the number of survey respondents that are listed to get an idea. Did you meet and is it a real representative of your population? It's also good to know that around the grade level information, we really encourage when you're looking at you and you're analyzing your PAYS that you get to that grade level to really understand what's going on, because obviously a 6th grade response is going to look very different than a 12th grade response, which is, like as Jeff said, why we survey throughout the adolescent years, so we can watch those trends as the youth are trending through. One of the other things that is also important to know that anytime there is a less than 25 valid participants and valid surveys within a grade, that information will not be included. This is to maintain anonymity and to ensure that we could never pick out, one student who identified in a certain background or whatever that might look like. So that's definitely a threshold that we looked at. Howard, I know you asked a question about anonymity, and we will talk about that in the end, but this is one of our key thresholds that we definitely hold fast to. Over the next few slides, I'm not going to go through these point by point, but really just, again, we see these as an opportunity for you to be able to take the slides to show others what they can see and the value and the breadth and depth of information that is in PAYS. In section 2, we have Atod Use and Access, and you can see here we have early initiation as well as high prevalence, those substances that youth are using most often. We also have those that are prescription meds as well as over the counter. We have questions around other drugs that students and youth are exposed to. We also have questions around other behaviors as related to substances. Again, you know, binge drinking, driving after alcohol or marijuana use, and then also how willing are they to try? Again, looking at these and thinking about substance use over as a youth develops through adolescence is very, very important for us to really understand, you know, what is happening, but also so we can really, really understand where we need to put our programming and where our efforts need to go. And Jeff's going to talk about those things a little later on. We have other antisocial behaviors that are included, including gambling, as well as behaviors such as selling illegal drugs or have been offered illegal drugs on school campuses. Have they been arrested? Have they been suspended? Again, thinking about that holistic experience that a youth is having. In section 4, we dive into the community as well as school climate and safety. This is where you get a lot of information from that schools find very, very important. And again, this idea of asking youth, how important do you think school is to you? And again, I cannot stress, we expect to see varying degrees of response from a 6th grader to a 12th grader. But the key is so that we can understand where we need to really ramp up how we need to address this. I'm working with a coalition in Montgomery County, and they have had low numbers in this area, and the school district recognizes that there are low numbers here. Additionally, in the community, there's also education is not a norm. It's not, or how education being important is not a norm. So again, these questions right here are helping drive their work that they're doing, not only within the school district, but also within their coalition. The positive school environment, again, we really want to see what this is looking like. We are expecting to see some different answers this year because of last year's experience within school. Same thing with pro-social activities. We are expecting to see some changes this year because kids didn't have as much of an opportunity to get together and do the activities that are listed here. But again, we want to see what that looks like over time because you can really look at, and those are a lot of protective factors there, right? Because we want kids are involved in those pro-social activities. So something we need to take a look at. Also in section 4, we have questions around violence and drugs on school property. And this is asking a little more deeply around bringing a weapon or been threatened with a weapon on school. And then we have the very important part around bullying and internet safety. We definitely want to know what those questions look like and the responses to those, because as we know, while it is in the school climate, it's also part of that community because kids, you know, are experiencing those issues throughout holistically, unfortunately, throughout their lives. So in section 5, we get into the social emotional health. This is an area that everyone is anticipating and really looking for answers and looking for data, especially in, and I'm not thrilled with the term of new normal, but this is our new normal. And, you know, the mental health concerns that are listed here, we do ask very specific questions of how our kids are feeling. We ask very specific questions around suicide risk, you know, and about how are they feeling around things. We ask questions around transitions and mobility because we know if youth are not, you know, grounded in one place and they're moving around a lot, or things have, you know, negatively happened throughout their life in the past year, big stressors on their life. We also have other stressful events listed or that we gather data on around death of friends and food insecurity. Within the COVID questions, we are asking questions that are directly related around stressful events. And I definitely want to say that, especially in this mental health space, in those COVID questions, while we are very focused on, some of the negative outcomes of the pandemic, we also are asking some positive questions around, did you have an opportunity to spend more time with your family? And that was a good thing. Did you do more fun things together and pro-social things together? So again, finding that balance of really understanding the mental health of our youth. We then move into section 6, where we are looking at systemic factors, and we're looking at perceptions, and perceptions are so big, especially in dealing with adolescents. We ask questions around, how risky do they think that, using the drugs that are listed here, whether that's daily smoking, marijuana use, prescription drug use. One of the things that we definitely see universally that, kids know smoking a pack of cigarettes a day is, it's a bad thing, and we see that. And part of that is that we definitely can, we can give some thumbs up to the tobacco efforts that have been going on for decades, because they're working, right? So we might have a little other work in some of the other areas, but definitely we can learn from the tobacco effort in thinking about the perception of risk. The same thing, perception around, how did they think that their parents would think it was wrong if they consumed on a regular basis, smoked cigarettes, marijuana, used marijuana, those kinds of things. But also is what kind of peer disapproval. These two pieces of information, many times we don't dive into because we're so hyper focused on what are the kids doing. But we really need to focus on how are they perceiving their actions and what do they think others are thinking about them. Because this is how you change, as Jeff said, their attitudes and their belief systems. And in order for behavior to change, you're going to have to make sure we do that. We also have community risk associated with availability. We ask questions around, hey, do you think you're going to get caught if you're, smoking marijuana or drinking? And again, not to be finger pointing here, but to get an understanding. If kids feel there's not going to be any consequences, much more likely that they're going to try, experiment, or use on a regular basis. And that goes right into the favorable attitudes to drug use. And those are risk factors that we know that, that parental disapproval of substance use is so important in adolescent development. That whole thing of having families being able to say, and talk about marijuana use, alcohol use. And I know there is a lot of effort going on throughout the state. So again, great way to really test how well our efforts are working around helping families talk about some of these tough subjects. So with risk and protection, those of you who know me know I love me some risk and protective factors. This is really how we know that where the work needs to go. While we're going to be focused on reducing a behavior or changing an attitude or changing a perception, the thing is we need to know and understand what's causing these behaviors to happen. In our model, there's 21 risk factors, and 9 protective factors. Again, we got to find a balance, right? A whole lot more risk than there are protective factors. Just as Jeff said earlier, the risk and protective factors land into one of 4 domains, either community, family, school, or parent individual. It's important that I think there's so much great information that comes out, but I think one of the fact that we look holistically at that youth is one of the key pieces that we all need to really hang our hat on with PACE, because going back and talking to a parent or a school or whomever to try to get them to understand the value, having an understanding of what is happening in all these different domains is how we're going to be able to approach and design our approaches and strategies the best way to address that, because it's not a one and done. It's not just a school problem or just a family problem or just an issue between peers, and we've got to work together to address all of them. Within our model, there are 6 behaviors that are impacted by risk and protective factors: that substance use, delinquency, teen pregnancy, school dropout, violence, depression, and anxiety. And that mental health piece, depression, anxiety on the end, it was only added maybe 4 or 5 years ago as we started getting in a place where we started talking about mental wellness. And again, Jeff's point earlier, there's not much that we can say that came out of the pandemic that was good, but obviously the computer use. But I think one of the other things that we can really say that the pandemic has helped us with, it is being able to talk about mental wellness and being able to talk about some of these topics that, you know, maybe we as a society weren't ready to talk about, especially in dealing with youth and children. So I think definitely something thumbs up, and a lot of people are going to have a lot of eyes on those. We don't just say, yeah, we think this all works. And these risk factors, they are based in a theoretical model. They represent a minimum of 2 longitudinal studies. These are highly researched, we know that they work. We know that they are related. They present across the developmental span, meaning that they affect a 6th grader the same as they do a 12th grader. Now, the outcome of them is going to look different between a 6th grader and a 12th grade. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But they also predict or buffer against multiple problem behaviors. Risk factors predict and raise the more risk factors, the higher the likelihood that we are going to have and see more problem behaviors. Protective factors buffer against these risk factors. And it really is kind of a balancing act that we have to really work across the multiple problem behaviors we're seeing. But we also need to know, and it's very important to really point out, that these risk factors have been proven effective across racial groups as well as regions throughout the United States. Again, going back to that Bach-Harrison norm, we are able to see that these risk and protective factors, they apply whether you're urban, suburban, rural, no matter where the racial group that you're looking at, they still apply across areas. Here is the theoretical models that our risk and protective factors are pointed to. Again, I'm not going to go into these really deeply because I could spend a whole hour just talking about risk and protection. But one of the things that is key to know, every time you see a check mark, this is when you know there's been at least how many? 2 longitudinal studies to connect that risk factor to that problem behavior. You will see that the problem behaviors on the left-hand side under risk factors chart that we have here look a little different than our pays. And this goes back to where this is the theoretical model, so it's very expanded. We have selected within Pennsylvania to focus more narrowly. There's only a few differences here, but there's not, again, we don't measure everything on the pays. This is why we need those Bach-Harrison norms and those national norms to really look at data more holistically as well. Looking at down at the bottom, we always get a lot of questions. What's a constitutional factor? Those constitutional factor that we look at, and what, you know, kind of thinking about individuals. One of the things that research has shown us is that youth that have a more outgoing personality, they have a little higher IQ, and academically it's a little easier for them. That we know that those youth are going to just kind of navigate through adolescence a little easier, right? And it kind of makes sense when you say it, but research has shown it's true. The thing that we know and what you see are with the check marks here, with these constitutional factors, what those check marks are showing is those youth who don't have those internal constitutional factors, like I mentioned, they are much more at risk for substance use, delinquency, violence, as well as depression and anxiety. So again, that adolescent experience is so affected by where we're by these risk factors in a way that we may not even really know or think about until we talk about it. Protective factors, moving to our next chart here, they're what buffer those risks. So we know the higher the risk, the higher the likelihood we're going to see problem youth behaviors. The higher the protective factor, the less likely we're going to see those problem youth behaviors. And it really is, it's not a number for number balance, but it is sort of a balancing act there. And what you will see is that the protective factor model, it is based on, for those of you who are aware, the social development strategy. And the social development strategy is grounded in bonding, because we know, and science has shown us, that when a youth is bonded to a positive adult or also positive peers, that their experience and that bonding can really help us achieve those healthy youth outcomes much more easily. What we know also is that we have to offer opportunities and rewards and recognition when youth make, they succeed or they make good choices. So this is how those protective factors really balance out. And that's where we absolutely feel like that being able to talk about and understand risk and protective factors is so vitally important, because you know what? You're not going to get this data anywhere else except for PACE. That's it. There's a lot of other risk factors that we know through ACEs or the determinants of health. We know those, the risk factors. But when it comes to self-reported information that youth are telling us, PACE is your only way. So again, a really valuable point to make here. What you see here, and many of you, I hope are familiar with this chart, this is the actual Pennsylvania Youth Survey risk and protective factors, and or the risk factors and their related behaviors. We know, and this is what we measure with PACE, again, grounded in our theoretical model, but this is what we measure and we find important here. This is a really good chart to share with others as you need to. Now, one of the things I really want to talk about is the fact that it's not one risk factor to one behavior. We definitely go into a risk factor looking at the same risk factor can lead to different outcomes. So if you have a youth who is not committed, has low commitment to school, they're at much higher risk for teen pregnancy, delinquency, school dropout, violence, and substance abuse, and so and misuse. And so we know when we're looking at a risk factor, it's not just we're going to look at this one risk factor and go, oh, well, this, if we know low commitment to school, it's only affected with school dropout. The reality is it's also affecting all these other outcomes. Now, conversely, school dropout, okay, that's an antisocial behavior or outcome for a youth. It's not just caused because youth aren't connected to school. If you think about it, if a youth has family history of school dropout, there's a lot of family conflict going on, there's a lot of transition and mobility, their friends are using drugs at some level, there's early and persistent problem behaviors, as well as a rebelliousness within that youth, they are at much higher risk of school dropout. So again, you can see here that within the domains, we have talked about school with this one slide. We've talked about school, we've talked about family, we've talked about peers, and we've talked about the individual themselves. So again, and also community from the transitions and mobility as the youth is moving through the community. So again, very important that we highlight and really look at what this looks like. One of the other things that we know, and this is just one of his favorite slides, is that we know, and this, while this data is a little bit older, it still tells us a lot. And what you're seeing here is that the higher number of risk factors or the lower number of risk factors really has an effect on that youth's ability to achieve to do well on their standardized testing. So as you can see here, this you see your trend definitely going down when a youth has 0 or 0, 1, or 2 up in that, very few risk factors. You can see their probability of meeting the standard is very high. As those risk factors go up, you see that trend for the most part going down, especially when you're looking at, and you can see it's with math, reading, and writing. So again, very, very clear understanding. This is a good slide for schools to take a look at. Again, this is what you see here, and I'm looking at my time here. I'm going to move through these quickly, but this shows us exactly where we need to focus. For those of you who have analyzed, it is important, again, that we stress that we like for you to take a look at these at grade level, but this is your overall. This is where you would start kind of thinking about your risk factors. This is the actual 2019 Pennsylvania risk factors. And what we're seeing here, I've kind of showcased, yellow circles are a little bit, in the middle, our red circles are where we have our highest issues, and that would be parental attitudes favorable to antisocial behavior, low commitment to school, and as well as perceived drug use. So these are kind of areas that we should go, at a state level, where are we landing? How are we addressing these? Also very important to talk about total risk. This is not what this basically is. You can see here, what this is telling us is that 41% of all of our 6th and 8th graders have 5 or more risk factors at an elevated rate. Okay, and 10th and 12th graders, they have 7 or more risk factors at an elevated rate. So we're looking at, we have some work to do, and we definitely need to really use our resources well. Now, conversely, again, this isn't an exact match, but you can see here, you know, we want high numbers. We want low numbers in risk. We want high numbers in protective factors. And you can see here in our family domain, we're not doing too badly. Our family, you know, 60 odd, all of our youth are reporting that they're attached to their family. They're given pro-social opportunities. They're recognized when they do well. But the thing is that to recognize here is that 54% of our youth in all grades, 6, 8, 10, 12, have 3 or more of elevated in a good place protective factors. So definitely you can kind of see the balance there. It's not a 100%. It will never add up to 100% because the way the statistical analysis works, but you can kind of get a balance there. So we're still looking at about half of our youth are very much in a space where we need to work with them, and we need to really, you know, help them in any way we can and ensure our resources are in a good place. So Jeff, I'm going to let you take us home. I'm going to turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you so much. A lot of information, but a lot of really important foundational work that we've done over the last 20 years, both at PCD, Epicenter, and all of our community and school partners. So you can see the different types of reports. We have 3 different profile reports that are released on a biannual basis. Each school district that participates gets their own report, as well as schools that have, as we mentioned, 25 or more kids in each grade. We also prepare a county level report and a state level report, which are posted on the PCD PAYS website at www.pays.pa.gov. The state full detail report is a more comprehensive version, allows us to delve a little deeper when we're working on information at the state level for where do we want to put our resources, put funding out to address the issues faced by our kids. So you can see the methodology overviews in that one, state sample, which we have a randomized sample of about 25,000 kids that are part of that. We include a little bit of cross-tabulation reports. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then comparisons by both at the state level as well as for males and females for the past 3 years. We say 2015, 17, 19 there. Obviously, they'll update to 17, 19, 21 for this upcoming year. And then we are really, really excited to release a special highlights report. One of the things that we've talked about is what has been the impact of the pandemic on our kids and our families. So for those school districts that participated online, as we mentioned earlier, about 85% of our districts did. We will have a special report coming out in December that will report on the impact of COVID-19 itself. For those districts that engaged in remote learning, what was the experience our kids had with that, as well as substance misuse, mental health, bullying, and food scarcity, to see what sort of impact the pandemic and what's been going on for the last, seems like 2 decades has been, but actually only about 18 months. But how has that impacted our kids and their families? So we always want people to understand, not just to get the report and stick it on a shelf and say, oh, that's real nice. Look at this series of reports that we have of every PAYS report going back to whenever you first began doing it. We've prepared a variety of different helpful guides, tips, resources to help you get the most out of the PAYS data. So you can see the website I mentioned, pays.pa.gov. There's an online data tool. We are very excited that we're going to be able to, in the past, we provided the crosstabs analysis for county and state level. We will be able to provide that at the district level, pending the participation in a training event by each school district. So more information to come on that. We'll talk about that at one of our upcoming webinars in 2022. But that is going to be real exciting. Crosstabs allow you to do a comparison as to how different questions relate to each other. So in other words, kids that reported being bullied, is there a higher use of substances? Kids that are experiencing mental health issues, what other factors may impact that that problem behavior that they're experiencing as well. The epicenter.psu.edu, I believe it's epis.psu.edu. Is that correct now, Sophia? But I think that link still works. We have a comprehensive user guide that'll walk you through how to get the most out of that data, page by page, step by step. How do you identify who should be at the table analyzing that data? How do you analyze the data itself? How do you use the data to take action? How do you find programs that help you address the various problem behaviors that your school district or your community may have? We also have a variety of report templates, and those are going to be beefed up even stronger for the upcoming release. We mentioned the special report will come out in December. The full report will come out in late April of 2022. So we'll have a variety of materials up online to help you analyze and get the most out of your individual data. So please visit those websites. We always talk about the importance of PAYS for grant writing, showing your local need for prevention programming. Not again saying that, well, in the nation, it is opioids that are the biggest impact on kids. Well, maybe in your community, it's binge drinking, or maybe it's vaping, or maybe it's mental health. PAYS data allows you to identify those needs and help you craft a grant proposal to bring funding in to address what your kids and your families need. Phyllis mentioned about strategic prevention planning, using the social development strategy, helping provide pro-social opportunities for our kids. How do we help make our kids more resilient, to buffer them from risk? What can we do as adults in our communities to help our kids? Our SAP programs, our student assistance program, rely on PAYS data to identify where they need the positive behavioral intervention and support, the PBIS model. PAYS plays an instrumental role in that. And then community engagement. How do you share the message about not just what the problems faced by our kids, but what's going well? Where are our kids doing really well that we need to reward them for engaging in those pro-social opportunities and provide more of them to help them succeed in life? So we'll pause there. A lot of information in a very short amount of time. I saw there were a ton of questions that came through, so I'm not sure the best way to do this. Phyllis, Sophia, you want to kind of take the lead?
Well, I know that Rose, thank you, Dr. Rose Baker has joined us, and I know Rose was answering feverishly in the chat, and so I know she provided a lot of information. But I know one of the early questions from Mallory over in Bucks County was around, we're getting a lot of pushback from school districts having an issue, and I'm trying to scroll up to your question, Mallory. Just in this, her question was, schools are receiving backlash from parents, community members, et cetera, about PAYS. It's causing districts to change consent process, and we're concerned fewer students will take the survey and that some districts may not want to administer the survey in the future. We need help. Any suggestions? Mallory, you are not the only one who's experiencing this. And we have a really great document that Kelsey and Mary at Bach Harrison pulled together that we can send you with ideas on if they change their consent to active consent versus passive consent. We do believe that this is in response to a school code that has been around forever. It's nothing new, but this interpretation of wearing masks and all the other climate things that we're dealing with have brought up the school code, and it's all about interpretation. We will say that we have experienced where once you go back to the school district and have a discussion about, it's about interpretation of that school code. That's why we don't have school law, it's code, because that's what local control is all about, is interpreting that code. So going back, and having a conversation with them that's very open, especially for those districts who've done it a long time. You have that in your arsenal. You also have in your, sorry, bad choice of words there, but in your toolbox that you have that, as well as the information. If they do decide to go to active consent, we will be sure to put, Sophia, if we can be sure to put that document into our box for everyone to see, so that it gives great ideas on active consent, how it can work. Buck Harrison was just working, I think, Kelsey, in Utah, that they had 200,000 active consent because it was all active consent or some crazy number, like major, and it does work and it can work. So it's not anything to be afraid of. It's just something different and new. And so I think definitely to go from there. Jeff, anybody, Rose, anybody y'all want to add to that? Anyone?
Yeah, just real quick. I think two important things to hone in on in those discussions. And it's a discussion. It's helping people understand why we do this. Number one, anonymous and confidential. It's not about individual kids. It is about what's going on in aggregate in the environment that our kids are growing up in, so we can help the greatest number of kids and their families and our overall community as possible. And number two, it's about the best use of taxpayer resources. How do we put our money towards what is actually being faced by our kids? I mentioned before about the idea that our kids may not be using opioids, but they may be vaping. So why put programs into preventing opioid abuse when we've got an issue that our kids are facing that is detrimental to their health? And bringing a program in to address vaping issues is a much better use of our resources than just doing what is the issue du jour, as they say, at the national or state level.
Great, excellent point, Jeff. And I think the key is, you can always reach out to us. We're always here to help. And just kind of, if you need to think out loud a minute, we're here. So please definitely reach out. But thank you, Mallory. And that's a good lead in. Also, Howard had a question around, is there a published list of safeguards that protect the anonymity of the youth taking the survey? Rose, I know that Dr. Baker, she did address, I think, your question, but I think the anonymity is a very good question. Especially, we had questions around, since so many folks are doing online, and it was like, how can we, definitely assure that our youth, well, it's all in the technology. And the very simple answer is, once a youth opens up that survey, and once they close it and go out, it can't be reopened. So no one can even go in and track. It's like a website. You can't go in and track. You can't open it up. You can't. So and if a youth starts and doesn't finish, they go back. So it's not even, they don't even get the same one again. So really, from an online perspective, that was kind of a very simple answer. Rose gave in the chat a very extensive answer around anonymity. We do have a lot of safeguards. The other thing that we have also talked a lot more about this year is for those youth who have an IEP in place and they need to have the survey read to them. Well, how do we do that if it's online? So one answer is turn on that Google Reader, turn on that function. Those kids should be used to that hearing. If they have that IEP and they have that special accommodation, PACE meets that, and even online it does, but have them put on those headphones and plug in. Now, if that's not available, we've given guidance to our coordinators to say, so that anonymity, to tell their proctors and teachers, don't sit where you can see the screen, sit somewhere else. And if they're doing more than one, the student's going to have to read out which question, because not everybody's on the same question at the same time. You don't get them in the same order. None of that works. There's now skip logic. That's something that was introduced with online. So if a youth answers a certain way on a certain question, that means they may skip several questions. So there's things that are in this that we have really tried to address. But it's and thank you, Rose, for that extensive question. But I just kind of wanted to address that in a really simple way. Jeff, anything else to add to that one?
No, I think you hit it right in the head.
Thank you. Finally, today has not been that day, but I'm glad I finally got something right today. So looking down, Howard also, is there data that correlates youth social issues to academic performance? I did show you the one slide. Now the research is a little bit older, but it's still very relevant and still, you know, it definitely supports, I think, your question there. And I think Rose might have answered that question more extensively as well. But there's a lot of links out there. And especially, even if you pull in what we would call archival data or supporting data, and you look at those social determinants of health, you look at those adverse childhood experiences, you look at some of these other risk factors that are out there, you can absolutely make a case of how those youth social issues relate back to academic performance. Great questions, Howard. And it takes that minute to kind of think, as we like to say, let PACE start your conversation, but let them figure out what other data sources you need to bring in to tell your story. And that's the real important part. So I'm trying to make sure I'm looking at the time here. Wyoming County, we're glad you're here today. I know you've got a tough road to toe. We thank you for your efforts. We will be glad to talk to you offline if you would like to. We are here, and with anybody, if you have a meeting and you're still trying to get folks on board, we can still do that. I mean, the official ending date is November 19th, but if we need a little wiggle, we could wiggle a little bit. Can't wiggle a lot, but we could wiggle a little bit, especially if it means, you know, especially like Wyoming, so you can get some data to help drive your needs assessment process and a lot of your other planning. But absolutely, please reach out to us, and we'll gladly call in. We'll be a part of meetings, whatever you need from us. We definitely want to help you with that. So thank you, and thank you for being here. We definitely want to help. Jeff, you want to add anything to that?
Just to reiterate that, anyone that wants us to speak, if you have concerned parents or school boards or anything else, we're here. I mean, we're very proud of this work. We're very confident in the anonymity, and we believe in the importance of it. PCD stresses a data-driven approach to prevention, using what our kids are telling us, as well as additional archival data, as Phyllis mentioned, to make the best use to help the greatest number of kids and families as we can. I'll say that over and over. People probably get sick of me doing so, but the bottom line is we want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, but we believe in upstream early prevention. Prevent problems before they occur. It doesn't do us a lot of good to deal with drug and alcohol treatment or mental health issues or dependency or delinquency if we can stop that from happening in the first place. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I believe that, and that's one of the things PACE provides.
Absolutely. Well said, Jeff. Well said. So looking at the time here, I want to get us out of here on time. We have a couple of other websites that, thank you, Sophia. And Howard or Fitzroy, I know you asked about how does PACE differentiated from the Communities That Care Youth survey. The very simple answer is it's the same survey with a Pennsylvania twist. And so we're able to ask the questions that are most pertinent to us, but we use their risk factor analysis. It's basically the same, but it gets in the space for Pennsylvania and the way that we need to work on it. Because all the states have their own twist to it, if you will, but they all measure risk and protective factors and the same problem behaviors. So great question, Fitzroy. So I just want to say a very quick thank you and a very, very quick and just show our real continued appreciation for everybody being a part of this webinar series that we've just kind of come up with and to see if it's going to work. On December 1st, we're hope that we're able to join us. Sophia has put up a poll that if you could take those of you who were able to stick with us, if you could just answer really quickly a couple of these highlights. These are not definitive dates because we want to meet what's good for y'all. If you could take this survey and give us your top two is what we're looking for. We would really appreciate it because we may juggle these around. Now, December 1st, it's happening. We're releasing the special report. January 5th, that's also happening. We're going to have live Q&A around the special report, you know, and some things like that. So we'll keep y'all posted as if we do any differences. I know Sophia had an idea of maybe we could do in one of these, talk about how to address hard questions, you know, and different situations. So just want y'all to know, thank you for coming.